and a Pacific small island developing state, participating in more than 2 years of negotiations have been a challenge. But we are committed to actively engaging in both processes, as we know that it is owed to future generations to truly show that we have learned the lessons of the COVID-19 pandemic by putting those lessons into action. Our children and our grandchildren will learn about the COVID-19 pandemic. We want them to also learn about how the world came together to ensure that we do better the next time. Understanding that business as usual in a global emergency is not enough. Regarding the way forward, we are supportive of the Chair's white paper proposal, and we would also support concluding the negotiations on the pandemic agreement by the end of this year. We remain flexible on the modalities, and we look forward to contributing to the work of the drafting group on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll call upon the delegate from Lithuania, followed by the delegate from Cambodia.
Thank you, Chair. Lithuania aligns itself with a statement to be delivered by the EU. The COVID pandemic has highlighted key challenges in pandemic preparedness and response at the global level. Coordinated actions in preparation for and the global response to the pandemics are essential if we are to learn from the devastating COVID crisis. Therefore, we thoroughly support the need for and drafting of the pandemic agreement. Despite that we are not quite there yet, we believe we have made a great progress over the last 2 years. To move forward effectively, we should build on the experience of the past 2 years and establish methods that led to success. We believe that extension of 1 year would provide enough time to continue the process with new approaches and address all remaining issues. Lithuania remains committed to continue working together towards a successful pandemic agreement. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll call upon the delegate from Cambodia, followed by the delegate from Grenada.
Chair, ladies and gentlemen, looking back, Cambodia successfully managed COVID-19 response by 4 strategies: leadership, investment in health, participation of whole government, society, community, and individual, solidarity, and partnership. The success of the response is testament of the past investment in building core capacity for IHR as guided by Asia-Pacific Strategy for Emerging Disease and Public Health Emergency. Our system was tested during the pandemic and strengthened through constant learning and improvement. This is evident from our second JEE to monitor and evaluate the country IHR, which was completed this month. We have seen an increase in many of the scores since the last JEE in 2016, and results emphasize the progress we have made to strengthen capacity to manage health security threat. The findings and recommendations from this JEE mission will serve as an important resource for updating Cambodian National Action Plan for Health Security, prioritizing opportunity for enhanced preparedness, operational readiness, system response, and public health action. Finding will also support implementation of the Asia-Pacific Health Security Action Framework that was endorsed in October last year. Cambodia supports the white paper and will continue to work closely with WHO and member states for the pandemic agreement. I thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we have just 4 more country speakers left, and due to time considerations, we have closed the list of speakers. And these are the remaining speakers: Grenada, Iran, Iraq, and Zimbabwe. Now I call upon the delegate from Grenada, followed by the delegate from Iran.
Grenada aligns itself with the statements delivered by Barbados and Jamaica on the pandemic agreement. Indeed, we agree that nobody or no country is safe unless everybody and every country is safe. Pathogens are threats to human health and economic development, and those with pandemic potential threaten our very existence. It is accepted that the next pandemic is all but certain. During such pandemics, the priority must be to harness all the world's human and scientific capacity to ensure the survival of all of humanity. We must demonstrate that we did learn from our previous failures. Grenada expresses appreciation to the INB for their hard work in engaging member states in several rounds of negotiations and developing a draft document. We express our gratitude to PAHO and WHO for facilitating the participation of member states of the Americas, particularly the small island developing states, in the negotiations. This was appreciated because many of these states lack representations in Geneva. Lastly, we say thanks to the representatives of CARICOM countries that participated in the negotiation process on our region's behalf. Despite the INB not reaching a consensus, we have not lost hope. We propose that the negotiations continue under the same bureau to finish the work of delivering the completed pandemic agreement. Grenada remains committed to supporting an instrument that promotes equity and solidarity as foundational principles, and we believe that this can still be achieved. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I call upon the delegate from Iran, followed by the delegate from Iraq.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As regards the development of WHO agreement on pandemic PPR, we believe that sufficient more time should be guaranteed for completing the remaining work. The process in which we are engaged is the progressive development of the international legal regime governing the pandemic PPR. This means that we need to collectively draft legal provisions that have not yet been regulated by international law or sufficiently addressed in state practice. This is a complex, delicate, and time-taking process which cannot be achieved by simplistic assessment of this agenda. The completion of this process cannot be ensured by any fast-track and expedited procedure options. The success of this collective work requires genuine willingness and readiness for meaningful international collaboration and assistance, which was not fully noticeable during the negotiation over the last 2 years. Any option providing for a tight and ambitious timeline would run the risk of the same problems we already experienced during the INB negotiation process. It's our historic and collective duty to put protection of global health prior to any short-term political considerations. The principles of equity, sovereignty, and non-intervention in domestic affairs should be the main foundations of our work in developing this agreement, while taking into due consideration the general approach of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capacities. It is also imperative to ensure that the benefit-sharing components of the agreement and the notion of equitable and unhindered access to health products in pandemic emergencies will not be hindered by the application of unilateral coercive measures. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Now I call upon the delegate from Iraq, followed by the delegate from Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. We extend our heartfelt congratulations to the Bureau for achieving close consensus, and we firmly believe that it is crucial to promptly finalize the updated IHR amendment text as a legacy document aimed at preventing pandemics. The IHR has already been adopted by 196 state parties, and by completing the IHR amendment, we can significantly enhance protection and strengthen global health security. Furthermore, the articles that currently have partial agreement in IHR amendment are closely related to the International Negotiation Body, INB, and for pandemic agreement, considering critical aspects in IHR amendments such as the elaboration of monitoring and evaluation framework, and updating indicators for compulsory assessment SPAR, and also elaborating the approach to pandemic agreement in IHR amendment, and taking special consideration for articles related to the financial mobilization. We can facilitate the successful finalization of the IMB pandemic agreement by finalizing the IHR amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I call upon the delegate from Zimbabwe, followed by the delegate from Central African Republic. Zimbabwe, we can't hear you. Is the delegate there from Zimbabwe?
Thank you, Chairman. Zimbabwe aligns itself with the statement delivered by South Africa on Zimbabwe aligns itself with the statement delivered by South Africa on behalf of the African region on these non-intergovernmental negotiations and the process to agree on a strengthened and legally binding pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response agreement. In keeping with African high-level ministerial consultation held in Addis Ababa on 27 April 2024, the 2 years of intense negotiations should address the challenges and lessons born out of COVID pandemic with respect to glaring inequalities in the availability of much-needed vaccines. In Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the WHO Director General's words, the inequities were catastrophic and, in our view, scandalous. For us, the issue of equity is at the core of an effective and meaningful instrument. We remain steadfast in our commitment to finalize this agreement, whose negotiations are a test and historic opportunity to demonstrate that multilateralism can and should be the approach to address future pandemics and build resilient health systems in our countries, particularly in Africa. The issues of sustainable financing, benefits sharing, and technology are critical and mutually reinforcing enablers that would underwrite the pandemic agreement as a fit-for-purpose instrument, faced with the inevitability of outbreaks of more pandemics. Zimbabwe supports the finalization of these crucial discussions that are at a critical juncture and for which much ground has been covered, while the remaining issues strongly demand decisive self-introspection with a view to correcting the health injustices that continue to afflict our societies. Sustainable financing and investment in local production of vaccines and medical equipment should be embedded in the provisions of the agreement under negotiation. To that end, posits that negotiation should continue and under the current bureau to maintain continuity and sustain the current momentum, the agreement's adoption at a special session before the end of 2024. It is supported that the continuation of the negotiations be before the end of 2024. I thank you.
Thank you. Now I call upon the Central African Republic and thereafter, lastly, Egypt.
Thank you, Chairman. My delegation is grateful for the commitment put in by member states of the WHO, the Bureau and the Secretariat over the last 2 years into the INB and IHR process. Everyone has been working very, very hard. We endorse what South Africa said. On behalf of Africa and Egypt, we need a pandemic treaty which is both fair and equitable. Amended IHRs need to be a basis for negotiations, and we urge member states to conclude the negotiations on the IHR, including obligations to ensure fair access to medicines, diagnostic kits, and vaccines, and by having a financial mechanism which is responsible and fair and which will provide financial assistance for full implementation. The INB could then focus on issues related to improving equity in all areas of prevention, preparedness and response as relating to pandemics. We do not, Chairman, wish to set a deadline for the conclusion of negotiations on either the IHR or in the INB to avoid important things not being able to be taken into consideration. We also don't want to rush to decisions which may then be contested. We would like to have a methodological, consensus-based and inclusive process in which all delegations can participate fairly and equitably. Less haste, more speed, so to speak. We can set milestones perhaps, but not deadlines which would handicap both the treaty and its implementation. If we want to have a pandemic treaty and international health regulations which are inclusive and beneficial to all countries, we need to give developing countries in particular the time required for them to be able to participate equitably and contribute to the drafting of a text acceptable to everyone. We will participate in negotiations involving all parties taking part in the negotiations on the various texts, so as to ensure that equity for all countries is guaranteed and that all countries' interests are taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll call upon Egypt, who are to be our first speaker representing the region. Now I'll call them last in the list of speakers from countries and regions.
Chair, Egypt aligns itself with the statement made by esteemed delegate from South Africa on behalf of the 47 members of the WHO African Group. Egypt appreciates the effort of the Bureau of the INB and the Secretariat for their tremendous efforts and hard work. As per our agreement in the second special session of the World Health Assembly resolution, equity must be upheld at the center of the treaty in order to be able to change the status quo. The fundamental problems experienced during COVID pandemic need to be resolved. We shouldn't wait for another pandemic to improve the governance and the global health security. We need to ensure a system that helps us to better prepare and prevent and respond to future health emergencies and pandemics. Health for all must be the priority over any interest and divisions, while equity remains at the center of the treaty. Its content have to be shaped up in the spirit of realizing solidarity and inclusivity. Egypt will continue to remain constructive in our engagement and deliverables and commit to finalize the instruments. We believe that negotiation must continue under the same Bureau to ensure continuity, and the report should be presented at a special session by the end of 2024, on the understanding that in those areas where there is convergence, the green text will not be reopened for negotiation. Before concluding, we reiterate that we can be safe together. So let's put our thoughts together so as to change the status quo of global health system architecture and governance for a better world for us and for our future generation. Thank you, Chair.
So we have concluded the countries, and now in accordance with Rule 46, applicable to observers at the World Health Assembly, I have the pleasure to give the floor to the representatives of European Union first, followed by Gavi.
Thank you very much, Chair. From the side of the European Union, we want to, first of all, thank all who worked in this process. And the fact that we are not quite there yet is neither dramatic nor a failure. To conclude within just 2 years would have been a record time for treaty negotiation. We have made tangible progress over the last 2 years, as captured in the draft text from the resumed INB9, and we remain committed to continue working together toward a successful pandemic agreement. As we plan the way forward, we should strive to build on and learn from experiences gained over the last 2 years. In this vein, we should set out modalities that are conducive to reaching a successful conclusion, that enable us to effectively address the remaining outstanding issues and finding convergence on all topics. In our view, the extension should give us sufficient time to resume the process with new modalities, as well as sufficient time to find consensus solutions. This can be achievable with a 1-year extension of the timeline. In conclusion, we may need more time, but we should be proud of what we have achieved so far. We have taken the INB to a good stopover place from where we will take off again towards the final destination, the adoption of a pandemic agreement. The remarkable progress made in the working group on the IHR also puts us in a situation that will enable us to adopt amendments to the IHR already, we hope, during this week. The adoption of these amendments within the very short time frame of only 2 years will send very positive signal to the outside world about the ability of the WHO and its membership to take concrete action to improve the global health architecture. Such adoption will also send very positive signal for the future of the INB process. There are still some issues to be solved. We call on all partners to redouble efforts to finalize our work and adopt the set of amendments on June 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I call upon Gavi.
The COVID-19 pandemic had an unprecedented impact on populations across the globe. It caught the world by surprise with incredibly high numbers of hospitalizations and deaths, and significantly disrupted essential health services, reversing decades of progress in socio-economic development. Alongside significant impacts to routine immunization, the COVID-19 crisis revealed several challenges for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, negatively impacting timely access to pandemic vaccines for populations of lower-income countries. Building on our collective learnings from the COVID-19 pandemic, Gavi has been actively engaged in multilateral processes to improve the global health emergency architecture, including in the pandemic agreement INB process. Gavi commends the work of member states and relevant stakeholders for their tireless commitment and progress on critical areas of the INB discussions. We encourage member states to continue with the negotiations after WHA 77 with the same dedication to finalize the pandemic agreement as soon as possible. In this respect, Gavi urges countries to ensure the final pandemic agreement recognizes immunization as an essential foundation for pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. 2. Reach consensus on a pathogen access and benefit sharing system that ensures fair and timely access to vaccines during future pandemics. 3. Support the creation of a coordinating financial mechanism that integrates specialized agencies with existing PPPR funds so that sustainable investments can be made and surge financing is available from day zero for the next pandemic. Thank you.
So thank you. And now we are close to 6 p.m. We are suspending our discussion for a 30-minute break, and we will begin at 6:30 p.m. Thereafter, there will be representatives from United Nations and other intergovernmental organizations, as well as non-state actors who will be speaking. Thank you.